Well, hello guys, how you all doing? I hope you are doing well. I hope this new year so far is treating you pretty good. You can see a little sneak peek of kind of the condition the 86 GMC's in right now. I have the feeling lately this past month like I'm working on a lot of things, but I'm not really getting anywhere. And I know I'm just anxious to share stuff with you, but yet it takes a long time. You know how it is when you're doing things and you just got to slow down, take your time, and go through it correctly, and that's what I'm doing. But at the same time, I want to be able to get videos out and show you. One thing I really don't like, but I don't know how else to avoid it, is I'm jumping from project to project. I'd like to be more consistent, you know, a weekly video showing progression on one project, but especially when I have projects that I'm being paid to do, I have to stick with that, and then I can do my own as I have money or time or whatever. So it is what it is. I know there are certain projects that a lot of people come here for, and the rest of the time they just don't watch. But I got too much going on. I can't stick with it. So I hope you understand. That's life. And my livelihood is not making videos at this point anyway. So anyway, as far as the 86 goes, first of all, the carburetor, I've been saying for now is going to put the Edelbrock on it and just run it temporarily. I found a Quadrajet, a FMV, up in my shop attic. Didn't even know I had it. I have no idea where I got it. So I was going to rebuild that. Maybe not bring you along on that ride. You see, when I rebuilt the Carter W1 for the 48 Chevy, people patted me on the back and said, "Great job." Then I did the Model B on the 66 Chevy C20. They stood up, they applauded, you know. I did the Edelbrock. Got a round of applause. People stood up and cheered. I did the electronic Rochester Quadrajet. Now, most of you were good. I mean, by and large, most of you are always supportive, always have good things to say or good advice to give. But as soon as I made a video on a Rochester, on a Quadrajet, the experts came out of the woodwork like you wouldn't believe, and their attitude was like only the gifted must touch a Quadrajet. You bring it into their shop, lay it at their feet, and you back away bowing, and you let the little Quadrajet gods do what they may. I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. I don't know what. It's a carburetor. Lighten up, people. No, I don't always say the right things or do the right things. I'm what the scientists call a human, perhaps. And apparently they aren't. I don't know. All that to say, I don't know if I'm going to make a specific detailed video going through another Quadrajet. Not necessarily because of the comments, but just because I've done it in the past year. Not really sure I'm going to get into tearing it completely apart to CAD plate all the steel parts and so forth. But I was cleaning this one up, and only then did I figure out that in ages past someone JB welded the filter fitting on No doubt it leaked. They couldn't get it to seal up anymore with a gasket or whatever. And so a common thing would be to just pull the filter out, seal it up with JB Weld, put an inline filter in the line, and away you go. I was kind of disappointed to see that, but I don't know. Maybe I could still rebuild it and just live with it, you know. There's an exact copy to this carburetor, this 4MV, on eBay. I could get it for $60-ish and rebuild that one. If any of you know you have a 4MV, this is in particular a 1705 8213. What I like about it is this would have been on trucks mainly, I would say, GM trucks through the 70s. And this would work directly with my choke spring mounted in the intake manifold. So that would just hook up right here, everything would be in alignment, and it would work great. And that's really what I wanted. So I was kind of really excited that I had this thing, but then kind of really disappointed to see that. So, I may tear it apart, see what it looks like. If, like I say, if any of you think you have one of these, a good rebuildable one, email me or shoot me a comment, get with me. You know, obviously I'd buy it from you, but within reason. Otherwise, I have been pulling unneeded electronics out of the cab and out of the frame. Originally, this truck had an electronic spark control HEI distributor, so that's why we got this extra harness here that went to your module. All the years that I drove this truck gave me faithful service. I never had a problem with it. I think there was kind of a tendency on a lot of these that had this electronic spark control where it would give you troubles, leave you stranded, and the mechanics of the day would splice. Well, actually you can see it here. I don't remember doing this, so this must have been done before I came around or bought the truck. But they put one of these really crappy Scotch splice things over the black, or is that brown? Hard to tell anymore. The first two wires there. So that basically shorts them together, and I think it pretty much makes the spark control module irrelevant. So I have nothing against HEI. A lot there again in my videos, when I do something like on this project, I'm trying to go old school, older school in this truck. People automatically assume that I don't like HEI distributors. Why anyone cares, I don't know. But no, HEI distributors are great. Now, understandably, they're already 50-year-old technology, which is kind of scary in itself, but never had a moment's problem with this thing. They work great. There's no point in even debating that. But on this project, it was the look I was going for under the hood. So I would have no problem running a truck or a vehicle with an HEI distributor. Now, I would only want one with the modulator lead and then of course your power and your tack wire or whatever. Not interested in the old school spark control module stuff. But be that as it may, I'm putting the old type canister coil on this thing, so I only have one wire to hook up to my primary, and then of course the wire from the distributor to the coil. So that eliminates a lot of wiring. In fact, I was able to pull out my little, what is it, tip in or tip out, Aaron tip-in switch, vacuum switch off the firewall. And here's the spark control module and all its wiring. It went to a knock sensor on the engine block. So all of that is irrelevant now. It was already irrelevant because somebody in times past spliced around it. The fuel switch. Here's all the wiring from the auxiliary tank and switch and solenoid from in the cab and the frame. I can also remove, I have the selector switch in the cab removed. I have all the assembly in the frame removed. So the way that goes, I mean, we're saving gas mileage here like gangbusters, you know what I mean? And with the distributor, you know, I think I made the comment in the distributor video when I went through that I may even eventually put a Pertronics unit in it instead of points, but it's not an issue. You know, to tune something up every couple of years, is that really a problem for us people who do this kind of thing? I don't think so. And I would also recommend that if you are contemplating any kind of similar project where you are going to have to be going through the wiring, maybe even a late 70s model vehicle, certainly on into the 80s and 90s, get yourself wiring diagrams book. You know, you can figure some stuff out with what's in the regular shop manual, but absolutely get yourself one of these if it's a model that already has a lot of wiring in it, more than they used to, you know. This is the only type of centerfold that I buy for myself, but they're really detailed. It may take you a little while to decipher what they're trying to tell you and how to find certain connections, but everything is labeled with wire color, with gauge wire, and then like on this one in particular, we have A through Z and 1 through 85 on the chart, and they'll give you a location, you know, A13 is where this connects, and on what page. You can go to the next page, go to A13, and see where it connects in relation to the rest of the harness. You know what I'm saying? Several years ago, a farmer asked me to do a body swap. He had his dad's 88 GMC, I think it was 3/4 ton pickup, that it was a beautiful runner, beautiful truck, but then it got totaled by a tornado. I think it had a GM crate motor 350 in it that had just been put in. So I took the body and the bed off, and then he bought a standard cab and service truck bed from a guy that wanted to keep that chassis. So I took that cab and bed and front clip and put it on his dad's 88 GMC chassis. And the new body was from a 92 Chevy. 4 years difference. There wasn't too much that had changed, but there was enough to make it confusing. And harness styles had changed, if they were ever the same from GMC to Chevy, which I don't know why they would make them different. But enough had changed. I had to run quite a bit of new circuits or reconnect where things ran before, they weren't running then, you know. And so I bought a 92 wiring harness manual, and that really helped explain and helped me figure out what I needed to do. So, and the thing's still running around today. So anyway, my recommendation for the month, if you're doing this kind of project. And speaking of we people who do these things, I was going to tell you a little story. So I have a teenage coworker. It's kind of funny. He and his older brother have both worked here. In the past, his brother did. And they are infatuated. I don't know the body design, the platform number designation, but the old, well, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, Crown Victorias, Grand Marquis, Continentals. They just love that Ford platform. To each his own. I have no idea why, other than as teenagers, that's what they had to drive. And, you know, I will forever love 64 Impalas because that was my very first car. Anyway, I've done some work in the past for him. He's not mechanically inclined, and it left him stranded the other day on the side of the highway coming to work. So I got it pulled in here, and quizzing him on the problem, he said he was driving down the road and the gauges, I think he even more specifically said the oil pressure gauge went down. He tried to, and it died. He tried to restart it. It restarted for him, so he went a little farther down the road, and it died again. Saw smoke coming out. He just saw smoke. I don't know that he knew from where. And that was it. The car was dead. And I think electrically it was dead. So yeah, I'll take a look at it. So to me, right away I was thinking maybe a chassis body ground issue where he lost gauges. Wasn't too sure about the smoke part, but you know, you got to start somewhere. So I popped the hood, checked the battery. I wouldn't say it was in the greatest condition. It needed charging, but it was still a good battery. Got to looking at the battery clamps. It was dirty and nasty looking, but on this little top band, the clamping part, I could see where it got hot. There was a black spot. So I put my ohm meter from the battery post to exposed wires sticking out of the sheathing or the jacketing on the battery cable, and there was no continuity, in this 1-inch space. So I thought, well, that's certainly a problem. So I'm thinking everything's just corroded. There's a bad connection. It got really hot right there because it's discolored. Maybe that was just the smoke he saw. So I replaced the battery clamps, cleaned everything up with soda water, thought we'd be good to go. Had continuity to the starter. So got in and the starter just clicks. Well, okay. Perhaps it was the starter that was part of the issue, making it overheat, So I pulled that out. I have a battery laying around. I jumped it with cables, and it just turned really slowly and was really gravelly, but it sounded terrible, the bearings and so forth. All right, well, we need a starter. So we picked one up. I put it in. Click, click, click. Sounds exactly the same as the starter I pulled out when you try and start it. So, oh no. So I got a cheater bar and a socket, and I put it on the crankshaft. Could not budge that engine. I even put a second wrench on the alternator pulley and tried pulling both at once. Couldn't budge it. Seized up. Got a little pan, dropped a little oil into it. Absolutely full of glitter. I mean, it looked like a 5-year-old Christmas party. You know what I'm saying? So that's just how it goes sometimes. You have big problems and you start with little problems and you work your way backwards. Never in a million years did I suspect that he had seized that engine up, but I have no doubt in my mind, being a teenage ride, country boy ride, that thing has been redlined down many a country road in its, in recent history. So that was unfortunate, but just kind of humorous to me, the diagnostic path we have to go down sometimes to find even obvious troubles. In addition to the carburetor, if you think you have the correct bottom washers for body mounts on this old square body design, let me know. I am missing 2. They have to be off the front, the radiator support piece. I took that off here. I've only had specific spots where I put parts in boxes, but I can't find them for the life of me. Where would they go? Where does this stuff disappear to? So it's hanging on there right now with 2 from the cab. So I need 2 more of these. If you think you have the correct ones, once again, contact me. I would gladly pay for 2 of these washers. Now, over the course of the last month, some interesting items showed up at my door. Okay, the P.O. box downtown. But I'm going to bring you in close and have a little bit of show and tell. Yippee! So one thing that has baffled scientists for generations is, where is the end of Kevin's generosity? I've mentioned him a couple times in the past. This guy, he sent me something so cool and interesting, and I'm going to have a lot of fun trying to figure out how to use it. But this is a 1965, I believe is what he said, Sears Penske automotive analyzer. And as you can see, it is in primo condition. Sent along a book, so hopefully I can figure out how to use this thing. This thing is so nice, I want to put it in a display case and just leave it. But I'm thinking maybe on the 86 GMC, when we get that thing running, that 327 would be a very fitting thing to use this. I mean, look at this thing. You got your Penske vacuum gauge, sold exclusively by Sears and Roebuck. All your little attachments, your distributor wrench, your test leads. I just don't even know what to say. Sears best. Isn't that the truth? In all correspondence regarding this article, always mention 244.21033. I'll do that. I'm gonna write to that address and see what they say. Product of Japan, I think it says. That's funny. Everything else is made in the U.S. I mean, isn't that thing just beautiful? I love it. Looking at the front, I feel like I need to be a graduate of NASA's Apollo space program to be able to understand and operate this thing, but we'll figure it out. Very cool. Thanks a lot, Kevin. I am going to enjoy getting to understand this thing, and believe me, I will keep it in a safe and clean place. The next thing I have to show you comes with an apology. I am 93.7% sure that the guy's name was David. I took the note he threw in with these to work with me, because that's where my laptop was, so I could email him and thank him. And now I can't find the note. I keep 100% of all the letters and things that are sent to me, so I know I will find it. Like I said, I'm just sure your name was David. You may not even want your real name mentioned. But nevertheless, when I do find the note, if your name is not David, I'll let you guys know. But he sent along brochures, 1963 brochures, that were his father's. One specifically Corvair, so he must have been leaning in that direction. Just kind of as nice as the day they were printed. And like I told him, I love having these things. I did not have a 63 brochure. I love having these things. First of all, they're cool to look at and nice to have. But secondly, I like using them for a reference. I mean, I'd been struggling with my 62, what color to paint it. I was kind of leaning towards white. Online images, white really looks good to me on that old style Corvair. But red, man, a guy would probably just might have to go towards red, you know? So that's specifically 63 Corvair brochure, and then one for all Chevrolet cars. And I find it interesting as you go through the models here. His father must have written down the prices for the models he was looking at, and he has 6 and 8 cylinder comparisons here also. So he was looking at Impalas and Biscaynes. Doesn't look like he was looking at station wagons there. No notes on the Chevy 2s. Oh, he's got the 300 and the 100 marked down. And then he has all 3 prices for the Corvair written down there. Corvair 563, 2135. Well, no price on the Corvette. What's the problem? Didn't want a Corvette? I'd take a 63 Corvette, wouldn't you? Anyway, a big thank you. I really appreciate it. I will take care of them, and I will use them, and I will treasure them. Yes, and once again, I just want to say, by no means feel obligated ever to send me anything. If you do want to send me a letter or anything, go to the About section on my YouTube channel. Look down there. You can find my email address. You can find my P.O. box. But please do not feel obligated at all. Now it's time for us to get down to brass tacks. Where'd that come from? Were people pulling up carpet or something? I don't know. Although my name is Swedish in origin, my family originates, at least as far back as the late medieval period, from the Baltic Sea region of northern Germany, or Brandenburg, then later the Kingdom of Prussia, if you prefer. In 1517, Martin Luther, having delivered his thesis with hammer and nails, ignited the Protestant Reformation. But what this new Lutheran church perhaps did not expect was that where Luther had spoken out against certain inconsistencies between Catholic doctrine and the Word, other Christians would take it further still. A couple of hundred years later, here in the American colonies, John Quincy Adams, our 6th president, would say it best: "We recognize no sovereign but God and no king but Jesus." In Titus 3, 1 and 2, we read Paul's words, "Remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good, to slander no one, to be peaceable and considerate, and always to be gentle toward everyone." What does Paul mean to be subject to rulers and authorities and to be obedient? Well, just that. But is that it? Are Christians under obligation by God to be hands down subject and completely obedient to all authority at all times and under all conditions? There are, of course, those who would say yes. After all, it's right there. We just read it. But if so, we have a problem. Let me show you what I mean. First of all, let's go back to Prussia for a moment. Literally, whole German villages immigrated to the U.S. with the purpose of finding religious freedom. But there were those who still remained back in the old country, living under a very different form of authority. By the time World War II came around, my family had already been quite settled in Kansas for 3 or 4 generations. Now, my grandpa on my father's side was the youngest of 5 brothers, and all of them but the oldest was drafted into the U.S. military, and all 4 of them served their country in various capacities. The thing is that it's quite possible that in Europe, some of their long-lost German cousins found themselves swept up in Hitler's war machine. While my relatives here in the States were subject to a government that had resolved to fight for the cause of freedom and justice, their still German national brothers were subject to a government that was resolved to wipe out entire people groups, abolish God, and hold monstrous dictators up as idols. So the question is, are both cases righteous? Does God want us to be obedient to an authority that upholds his truth on one hand, and an authority that tramples his truth into the mud on the other? The trouble with the "we need to be obedient at all times and under all conditions" argument is that we often don't see it played out in Scripture. God needed a leader for his people in bondage and chose Moses, a man whom he prepared for the task by giving him a 40-year leadership course in the royal palace and a 40-year survival course in the desert. Although Moses didn't understand it at the time, I'm sure he came to realize that God had spent 80 years preparing him to lead a nation into the desert. Similarly, God needed a man to redeem his people in bondage and chose himself. The Word. He waited 30 years for his human body and time to mature, then spent 40 days in the wilderness. He became the last Adam. He got it right where the first Adam got it wrong. He became the last blood sacrifice the world would ever be required to make, thus redeeming the human race and making it not only possible for us to one day be with our Father in heaven, but also that Holy Spirit may dwell within us while we are here on earth. Moses' mother was not being obedient to rulers and authority when she set her baby adrift in a basket in the river. Neither were Jesus' earthly parents obedient when they listened to Gabriel and fled to Egypt in order to hide their child as well. When King Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree that all were to worship the idol he had built, 3 troublesome Jews who refused to bow were brought before him. Daniel 3:16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." Not only were they refusing to be obedient to the king, they weren't even going to dignify the king's tantrum with a response. When the jealous supervisors and satraps approached King Darius, they convinced the king that for the next 30 days no one should pray to anyone but the king. Perhaps flattered by the idea, King Darius signed it into law without knowing or perhaps neglecting the fact that his favorite official, Daniel, was in the habit of praying to the one true God 3 times a day. Daniel continued to pray despite the law, and the Lord sealed the mouths of the lions, until, that is, the other supervisors were thrown into the pit. 1 Kings 18:16 through 18. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." In fact, we can make a definite case that almost all of Elijah's ministry revolved around confronting authority. 2 Kings 1:9. Then he sent to Elijah a captain with his 50 men. The captain went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of a hill, and said to him, "Man of God," the king says, "come down." Elijah answered the captain, "If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. Then fire fell from heaven and consumed the captain and his men. At this the king sent to Elijah another captain with his 50 men. The captain said to him, Elijah, "Man of God, this is what the king says. Come down at once." "If I am a man of God," Elijah replied, "may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." Then the fire of God fell from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men. So the king sent a third captain with his 50 men. This third captain went up and fell on his knees before Elijah. "Man of God," he begged, "please have respect for my life and the lives of these 50 men, your servants. See, fire has fallen from heaven and consumed the first 2 captains and all their men, but now have respect for my life." The angel of the Lord said to Elijah, "Go down with him, do not be afraid of him." So Elijah got up and went down with him to the king. Here we have military officers, each with 50 men, ordering Elijah to come in the name of the king. Instead of instant obedience to authority from Elijah, we get a heavenly incendiary bomb that wipes out 102 men. This was heaven-authorized disobedience to authority. Acts 4:18 through 20. Then they, the Sanhedrin, called them, Peter and John, in again and commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John replied, which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him? You be the judges. As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. Mark 6:17 and 18. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Matthew 10:16 through 22. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard. You will be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say. For it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you read the four Gospels, it is clear that Jesus did indeed practice what he preached. These were the words that he lived by. He knew that the truth and love he showed us would make us hated by the world. That sure sounds odd, doesn't it? We tell of truth and love, and the world hates it. Now, I could fill page after page with accounts from the Bible showing where the Lord's people were in direct disobedience to rulers and authorities. So where does that leave us with Titus 3? Well, Paul's words are obviously true, and we have to accept them as the Lord's will for our lives. But it can by no means be the end of it. Consider Paul's words to the church in Ephesus, Ephesians 6. Finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. I should have known that by memory, but I lost my place. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people. We are to equip ourselves with truth, righteousness, and readiness. Also with faith, salvation, and the Word, and to pray in the Spirit with all kinds of prayers and requests. It's been noted by many that most of these are defensive armor, all except the sword, which is the Word. But I see another that is offensive. That is, that our feet are fitted with readiness. It is time we suit ourselves up with actual truth, faith, righteousness, the knowledge of our salvation, and be ready to strike with the word. As Christians, we belong to a kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, and its authority trumps all. Matthew 16:18 and 19 states, And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. The word church here was originally the Greek word ekklesia, that means much more than church, as we have come to think of it. Its literal meaning is an assembly of people in a legislative or governing capacity. It's little wonder King James chose to make the word a little more ambiguous, perhaps not comfortable with the idea that the masses think of themselves as a governing body. We are a governing body with kingdom authority. We possess keys of power that can control the gates of Hades. We can bind things and loose things here on earth and consider them bound or loosed in heaven. James Bond carried a mere license to kill. We carry a spiritual license from the throne of heaven to control principalities and powers here on earth. This earth is our domain, created for us by God, not for Satan and his demons, and we have authority over it. Consider further the Great Commission, the mission that Jesus gave us. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus is the supreme authority, and he has given us authorization to go and make disciples of nations, not just individuals, but nations. I would like to recommend to you that you read the book of Esther. Read it with the mindset that the church today is Esther, and Haman is those in authority who have sold themselves to evil. She could have simply been obedient to the authorities and rulers. If she had approached it with the black and white view of obedience and said, well, I have to obey their authority, then all of the Jews, God's chosen people, would have been dead. Although frightened and alone, she approached the king and petitioned for the life of her people. And in the end, the gallows, or the pole that Haman had constructed to hang Mordecai upon, ended up being his own demise. Yes, we are obedient to rulers and authorities, and we do what is good and right. But in the end, our supreme allegiance is with God. It's a frightening thing to stand alone like Esther and say, no, this isn't right. But again, like Paul said in Ephesians, stand firm, and when you have done everything you know to do, continue to stand. God works in marvelous ways, and when we equip ourselves with readiness, strike with the word, and stand against evil, it's time the church, the ecclesia, begins to stand. And now I thank you so much that you joined me this month again for this. I really appreciate it. I pray that God will give you faith and righteousness and determination to stand in this world we find ourselves in. I am praying for you guys. Won't you do the same for me? God bless. See you next time.